Hi guys, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you are refreshed after the break, that you had your coffee, and we are ready to start the next chat with our esteemed speaker. As you may have noticed, our today's conference is slightly unequal when it comes to the number of female and male speakers, but this is, it's very important to have that inequality, because who can speak better about women in business than women in business themselves, right? It makes sense. So it is my great pleasure to welcome among us Katarína Šilhárová, Director of PricewaterhouseCoopers Slovakia. And we are going to talk about a report, the Women in Work Index, because PwC conducted a global research to discover whether women's employment rates are increasing and what impact it has on our global GDP. Welcome, Katarína. How are you today?
Hi, Barbara. Thank you. I just need to talk to the agency because I can hear you currently twice, so I have like double now. Just a second.
No problem. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, so we are good to go. According to PwC study, Women in Work Index, increasing women's employment in Slovakia to the levels of Sweden could increase the GDP by 7.8%. So how much more should women's employment be increased to get these numbers?
Well, as much as possible, indeed. Thank you for the question, Barbara, and good afternoon to everybody. So hopefully we can now hear each other well. We have a few figures, and I will show you a bit more details based on the latest Women in Work Index prepared by PwC. But the proper answer goes somewhere to 15%. But I will uncover for you more details, and I have a few slides here where we can see how Slovakia compares to other OECD countries. Actually, let's see whether my presentations works. Okay. So if not, then I will basically continue. Okay, basically the Slovakia ranks among the other 33 OECD countries at 26th place, which is something which we probably are not that much proud of here. The question is how we can basically improve, and why is the situation that bad in Slovakia? If we have a look on the most successful countries, which are, let's say, Sweden, Iceland, or Slovenia, then the level of employment in these countries of women is somewhere around 80 or 84%, whereby in Slovakia, the rate of women employment is somewhere around 65.9%, where we can see a huge gap. So if we would be able in Slovakia to employ actually as much women as they are employed in Sweden, so we would be able to boost and increase our GDP based on the 2018 results by additional 7.8%, which represents almost 7 billion euro. That is a huge number. The number could be even more increased if we would be able somehow to close the gender gap pay, which is currently quite high. And this number, the cumulative income the women could basically get from closing the gap would be somewhere around 9 billion euros. So we see that the women have a great potential there. And they have great potential for their personal and for their professional growth. And thus it's upon us to use it for the economic growth. So it's upon the state authorities, it's upon the companies, and it's upon also the individuals within the companies, how we will be actually able to unlock the potential.
Thank you very much, Katarína. You said that Slovakia scored on the 26th position out of 33 OECD countries, and has long been the lowest among the countries of Central and Eastern Europe since 2000. So why are we scoring so low?
Well, the question is more complex. And there is no like easy answer that why, because we see that the countries are dropping and going up in the index over the time, because this is something which is measured not only in 1 year, but we have the statistics available from year 2000 until 2018. But to have a better answer for these questions, we need to have a look on the structure of the index. And there are several indicators which are included in the index. The first one is the women employment. So as I already mentioned, we have 65% of women working in our economy. So which means that almost 1/3 of women does not work at all. Comparing to those really successful countries like Sweden or Slovenia, the portion of women which are not working is somewhere around 20 or below 20%. So if we want to really get the women to work, so at least the gap of 15%, we should be able to cope with this one, because if it's possible in other countries, there is no reason why it wouldn't be possible in Slovakia. Yeah? So this is one of the reasons. The other reason is the difference between employment of women and men. So currently we have there quite huge percentage, around 11%. So the employment of men and women, and basically in the successful countries, this percentage is not below like 3 or 5, a maximum to 5%. So if we would be able to employ the women at the same level as we employ men, or as men are currently employed, then basically the GDP could be even increased by additional 10%. So that's also an important factor. The other point is as I mentioned previously, the gender pay gap. So the women which are not paid as much as basically are paid men. And this is really quite interesting number, because in this year, the Slovakia has 22% of women which are not that well paid as men are. So this is really a huge difference to those successful countries where the percentage is maximum up to 10%. So, and we see, for example, similar economies like Poland, where this gap is maximum to 5%, or for example, in Slovenia, this is at the level of 22%. So considering that the economies are not that different to each other, this is really a huge gap, which is upon to the companies and about the leadership of the companies, thinking how this gap could be closed, and there should be the payment of men and women should be considered evenly. The other part of the index is also the share of women working full time. So this is quite interesting that and basically we can observe it in all post-communist countries that the pattern is very similar, and there is a large portion of women working full time. However, currently Slovakia has approximately 93% of women working full time, which is very hard to cope with all those other duties women may have in their families and in their personal lives. So imagining that we have, let's say, standard 8 hours working a day, plus some travel time, plus some short lunch break time. In that moment, it's very difficult really to manage the childcare, to manage the household, and do all the other duties which are basically which stays with women. So really, I think the flexibility at the employer side is the key really to unlock the potential and to help the women to really return back, or let's say after maternity leave, or once they have some other additional things they need to take care of. Yeah. And the last one is also the women unemployment rate. This went significantly down if we compare it to, let's say, to year 2000, but this relates more to the overall economy standard which we currently have. So there are not that big differences between other OECD countries and Slovakia. So the unemployment rate for the women in Slovakia comparing to other OECD countries is very similar.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. I would like to come back to the year 2000, because you said that Slovakia achieved twice the share of women in corporate management compared to OECD average. So it was 22% against 10%. But in 2018, we reached only the average value, 24% against 22%. Why? Why are the other countries surpassing us so quickly?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I think we do not have a very clear answer for this one. This is really a very interesting observation, because really in the year 2000 we were at the 4th place comparing to other OECD countries. So, and there were only few Scandinavian countries like Finland, Norway, and Sweden, basically with higher portion of women in management. And in Slovakia, we were at the level, as you mentioned, 22%, which was great. However, over the time, we see that this percentage has increased significantly in many countries. For example, we can observe that in France, we currently have 40% of women working in management, whereby the percentage in Slovakia increased just by 2 percentage points, which is really not a lot. So the question is, when the dynamic in other countries is that high, why basically we were not able to come further and to really to stay with the dynamic when we were at the 22, now at the 24? What has happened that we are not able basically to put and really to promote further women in our management? So the interesting fact is that, for example, there is similar number of graduates from universities, or usually there is a higher number of women from universities. So the question is, where are the women lost on the track in their professional career when they are not able to really to step into the management position? So really, I think we have great examples, let's say in France, Iceland, etc. Some of them are coming from the quotas given by the state. But really in Slovakia, we were not that successful, and we are seeing how we basically are moving back to the average and to the end of the graph. Yeah.
Thank you very much again for these interesting insights. And ultimately, I would like to know, why is the share of women in management not increasing in Slovakia as quickly as in other OECD countries? Do you have any insights on that as well?
Well, sure. And I wish I could have a very nice slide with 3 bullet points and we could share the responsibilities and solve this problem. I think that the answer to this question is more complex, and lots of this was already discussed during the first panel discussion. And I think also Mrs. Nicholsonova and Ms. Lexman also mentioned a lot from the problems which is Slovakia currently facing. So definitely on the first place, it's the childcare and the availability of the childcare in Slovakia. So we know that we have actually no availability of state creches. The children group which were proposed in parliament have not passed. There are still limitations in the state kindergartens, and even the private kindergartens are still boosting. They are still quite expensive for many families. So basically taking into consideration the gender pay gap and the expensive private kindergarten care, so many women then decide not basically to return back from the maternity leave. Moreover, we have quite a long maternity leave, so it's actually the 4th longest from the other OECD countries. But this by itself, it's not a problem. The problem is the practice when the women are returning back to their work. So we see that there is not that much flexibility offered from the companies, and we see that also the process when they are coming back is very difficult. So if you stay at home for 3 years, some of them really for a longer period, there should be a program, some coaching available at the company side to enable and to make the whole process for women a bit easier. And the other problem is also the sharing of the household's works and the family and the care about the family. So I think that in this respect, there might be helpful the increasing trend of parental leave. And we see also in our company, but I think in many others, that the fathers are using the opportunity to take some parental leave, because at that moment they really can experience how it is to stay with the child. They see how much of the work the household itself requires. So then the sharing even after coming back to work might be easier for many of them. But it's just but the percentage of parental leaves is still something which is very low comparing to other countries. So there we see the increasing trends, but we need really to get more of them to improve the overall statistics. And really, for some of the countries, the quotas or the mandatory quotas work. So, for example, from Iceland, we experienced that they have quotas for mandatory portion of women in the company. There is in the private sector, it's at the level of 40%. In the public sector, it's at the level of 50%, which basically makes the companies and also the authorities aware that women are an important factor in the company's lives, and they are still trying to include them more and more. And sometimes they are also required to prove that they pay the similar or the same portion of money for the same work. So then the gender pay gap is somehow closing in individual companies. So I think it's a combination of several factors, and it's not easy really to state one of them. But this really shows us that there is a huge potential. And I think it's upon us how we basically will be able to unlock this potential and how we can use it in economic growth. And I think that Mr. Blaško at the beginning sometimes said that there are mainly women talking to women. And I think really it's upon us to be quite loud in the process, to be heard really at the relevant places. So, and it's upon us to really be prepared to discuss the topic at the state authorities level, at the individual companies, and be individually ambassadors of the idea, because we really can observe that having the women in management, having them in the companies is something of a big advantage for the company.
Thank you very much. So the research was conducted in 2018. When is the next research going to be conducted? Do you have any dates?
Basically, we are trying to analyze the results on an annual basis, but if we can somehow see the trends and see how the situation is changing, so usually the situation does not change from one year to another, but we need really to observe long-term trends within the companies or within the individual countries. So we will definitely prepare next one for 2019 once the statistics for 2019 will be available. And then we are happy to share.
What are your expectations in the following year for Slovak women?
Well, I think there will be two trends. I think that the flexibility portion will definitely increase because the working from home really unlocks also this potential for at the company's level, and this is something which might be helpful also for many women. So really, then it's easier, at least minimizing the traveling time. On the other hand, really, the elimination of certain professions will really hit many women. So the overall index of women employment might be hit and might be even worse in the future.
Thank you very much, Katarína. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It was really nice to be with you. And
thank you for getting in touch. A big applause for our speaker.